Mungkinkah streaming konser metal? Mungkin dong, tanpa debit BCA. Jangan lupa aktivasi dulu.
Buat kamu mencari yang terbaik, fashion, gadget, sport, hobi, temukan semua di BLOCKBUSTER. Gratis ongkir, 100% orisinil, pengiriman cepat. Karena kamu nomor 1.
Feels like there's no risk, that's because there's going to be no reward. It has to feel unbelievably risky, but you think that the execution is going to be great.
As some of you know or may not know, Blockbuster Movies and the film and movie business has hit an all-time high in 2019, over $42 billion in box office sales around the whole entire world. And that is a new high, it's a new record, and this is all pre-COVID. But now that we're now into COVID, and what's the future of franchise films, what's the future of the movie business, there's no one better to talk to than my best buddy in the whole of Hollywood. Right here to my right, Greg Silver.
Hi, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be with you. I'm really grateful to have my co-founder in Stampede Ventures, Jason Ma, interviewing me.
Well,
It's a great honor.
it's a great honor to talk to you even more, Greg. So let's just get into this. I mean, Greg, you know, we've known each other for years now. You are a kingpin in Hollywood, but it takes a lot, especially in the Hollywood industry, to go from where you started to where you ended up at Warner Brothers and to now starting your own studio. Walk us through. I want to start with, you're at Stanford. You're in the year.
My parents are happy.
Your parents are happy, your Jewish parents are happy, like a Chinese parent is happy, like my son is gonna be a doctor, he's gonna be a lawyer, he's gonna be a banker, he's gonna be an engineer, he's gonna work in the Valley. It's the year of Zuckerberg, it's the year of all these major superstars from Silicon Valley in your class. And you chose to go a different route. Walk me through, what happened?
It's exactly the path I was on. I was gonna go be a banker at Goldman Sachs. That was my dream since I was 9 years old. And going through Stanford and studying economics seemed like a good way to get there. And I came down to LA to do an internship between my junior year and senior year. And I was waiting tables to make money and living in a one-bedroom apartment that I shared with my roommate from up at Stanford. And I felt like the king of the world, that I had my own place in Westwood. And I came back from work one day and I saw a whole crowd of people. I didn't know exactly what was going on, but it turned out it was the world premiere of The Fugitive.
Wow.
And I parked my car and I ran up and I looked over like 5 people deep and I saw this magic energy, felt this magic energy, and decided like, I want to be a part of that. How do I get to be a part of that? Not like a movie star or director or writer, but like the people that were involved, it seemed like they were doing something magical. And I know it's silly because it's The Fugitive, but it felt like they were doing something important.
See Harrison Ford?
Yeah, I did not see Harrison Ford. I saw a lot of people walking around with, headphones and clipboards.
Interesting.
But it all seemed really exciting. And I went back to school and went back to my economics classes and I just couldn't concentrate.
Interesting.
And I couldn't get back. I was dreaming about it and I love movies so much. I've watched movies my whole life and television my whole life. So I went to talk to a counselor at the school to say, like, what do I do? And they said, well, you've finished the film major. And I didn't know that I had accidentally finished every film and television course offered at Stanford because that, which I thought was fun while I was doing my work. I could go have fun learning about movies and television. And so I ended up graduating early, which my parents were happy about, saved them a couple, quarters of tuition.
Nice.
And came down to LA and started trying to figure out how to do this. And my first job was cutting fruit on set. And the beauty of this business is if you have a good attitude and you're willing to work hard, people will take you and teach you a little bit more, and the next person will teach you a little bit more, and the next person. So I started cutting fruit. I got a job as a secretary. I worked as a secretary for 2 years. And while I was a secretary, I read every screenplay I could get my hands on. And that became valuable.
Was that at Warner Brothers?
So the secretary job was at Sony, and then at Disney. And then my first executive job was for a producer at Warner Brothers. And they wanted, you make a joke about the Jewish parents and the Chinese parents, but the work ethic that we were all brought up with was not really here in LA.
Interesting.
People came here to have fun, have a little bit of glamour, hang out with movie stars, to drink and do drugs.
Right.
And I just wanted to read scripts. And so as I read more and more scripts and I kept finding things that turned into movies, they kept promoting me and promoting me and promoting me. And then one day they made me the president of Warner Brothers.
I mean, that sounds really easy. I don't think it's that easy. What was like your first break? What was like the first script that became a hit and the studio executives were like, Greg has a nose for a good story?
So when I was an assistant at TriStar, I was in charge of all of the submissions from prison and all of the submissions from writers who had no agents or representatives.
There was actual scripts submitted from prison?
Like thousands of them.
Because people are so bored in prison, they're just writing scripts.
Every script from prison was the same.
How to get out of prison?
No, it was the story of somebody who was wrongly accused of crime,
right.
who was in prison for the wrong thing.
Some Shawshank Redemption,
Yeah.
got it.
And there was one script that was from the unsolicited pile from a Canadian guy who didn't have an agent. And what we were supposed to do was open the package, take a letter that said we can't read if you don't have an agent or a lawyer, put it in and mail it back.
Huh.
But I read everything I could get my hands on, so I read all of them. And I read one, and I thought it was a good idea for a movie. I gave it to a friend, and they made it into a movie. They made it into a movie on Cinemax. There was a lot of sex and nudity in it, and that's what Cinemax wanted. And my buddy sent me a check for $5,000. And I couldn't believe it. It was the most money I'd ever seen in my life.
They still gave you credit for finding
the script. They gave me I was like, they're gonna give me $5,000 for finding scripts? I'm just gonna read scripts all day. That's all I'm gonna do. So I just read and read, and then another script was in a pile that without an agent. And that one, now I was at this production company, Warner Brothers, and that one I knew was something special. And we sold it right away to Disney, and they made it within a year. And it was a movie called 10 Things I Hate About You. And that was a big break for me. And then around the same time, I found a script called Gorilla Boy, which turned out to be George of the Jungle.
Wow.
That was coming out of Disney. And by this time, I had moved over. Warner Brothers had hired me because I was finding everything. And they put me on a movie to work on called The Matrix. And so within 3 years of arriving in LA from cutting fruit, on one weekend, I had a movie that I was an associate producer on, 10 Things I Hate About You, and The Matrix, which I was the junior executive on, come out the same weekend.
Crazy.
And that was the start of the run. And then the really big break, which I think is what, everybody watching this, it's the most interesting part. How do you find a great piece of IP? How do you find a blockbuster? Is there was a producer who had a deal at Warner Brothers named David Heyman.
Yeah.
And one of his executives found a book that he read and liked, and they sent it into the studio. And it was a book that couldn't find a publisher. It had been rejected by 141 publishers. and it came to Lionel Wigrum, who's a senior executive there, who gave it to me to read. That's how it worked at Warner Brothers. The senior executives had the readers read. And I read it overnight, and I was like, this is a magical, amazing thing. I know nobody wants it, but there's something here. And I went to the staff meeting and pitched the idea of the movie.
But you read the book.
The book.
Okay, got it.
And I remember pitching it, and the heads of the studio were like, that sounds like a good idea, but we can't use a British protagonist. We'll have to change it to American. And we bought the rights to the whole series. We auctioned the rights to the whole series for $25,000. And that was Harry Potter. And Harry Potter went on to be, a $35 billion business, probably more now, growing from a $25,000 option.
So obviously that must have been the trigger moment that the studios were like, Greg Silverman, this guy, this junior executive has an eye and a nose for the future franchises. What happened after that for you at Warner?
Well, it actually wasn't that big a moment. So we sold it. Lionel actually chose to work on it with somebody else. He had an executive that he liked working on things with better. They had better chemistry, so they went and started working on it. And I sort of forgot about it because I went on to read the next 1,000 things. And we went and made Deep Blue Sea. We found Cats and Dogs. We found, obviously The Matrix was coming out then, and all that stuff was happening. I didn't come back to Harry Potter until I became president.
Harry, be safe. Be strong.
Harry Potter. You have fought valiantly. Now, join me and confront your fate.
You've kept him alive so that he can die at the proper moment.
Bring him to me.
Let's find out where he is. If we find him, we can end this.
I say we jump now!
Hogwarts is threatened. Man the boundaries, protect us.
I have to go back, haven't I?
It's a suicide mission. The boy who lived, come to die.
Tell them how it happened that night. How you looked him in the eye. A man who trusted you and killed him. I never wanted any of you to die for me. You'll stay with me.
Always.
Until the end. Come on, Tom. Let's finish this the way we started. Together!
Where we had to find a new director, bring it in, and then moving into Fantastic Beasts and how to put it into a theatrical play, worked on that a bit. What are we going to do with theme parks? What are we going to do with video games? And I shifted to go find the next big franchise. And so the next big thing for me was, so we talked about an unknown piece of IP that you find. But what about a piece of IP that needs help? Right?
It's a known IP, but it's kind of dead in the water.
Right.
And what do you
So look, everybody knows that Iron Man is the greatest franchise starter ever. Iron Man was in development at New Line for 9 or 10 years.
Interesting.
And they couldn't figure out how to crack it. And so it went to Paramount, and they couldn't figure out how to crack it. And then Kevin Feige came in and took over Marvel and said, this is how we do it. And no one wanted to hire Robert Downey.
Right, because he was just coming.
So,
Yeah.
it's the material and the take And so my next thing I said, well, what is something that they want me to work on that maybe I can put the take on it as opposed to having to find it? And so...
What do you mean by take?
So, like, here's a piece of IP. What are we going to do with it?
Got it.
So, with Iron Man, they were doing all these very serious versions of New Line and it didn't work. And then Kevin Feige and Downey said, well, what if he's kind of a pompous jerk, but he's really capable? And that was the take for Iron Man, right? But for us, I was asked to look after Batman. And they had just done Batman and Robin, which was a huge moneymaker for the studio, but not a great movie.
This is George Clooney?
Yeah, the one with the nipples.
Got it. I don't remember.
Right. Directed by one of my favorite directors who just passed away recently, Joel Schumacher. But the movie wasn't the direction of where they were going. They were getting bigger and more fanciful and more supernatural and blah, blah, blah. And so I wrote a report on, here's what I think we should do with Batman. I think we should start over. And I think the interesting thing about Batman is that he's a regular guy. Happens to have a few $1 billion, but like, he doesn't have any superpowers. He can't fly. He's not impenetrable. If he gets hit with a bullet, what would it look like to see how we have to train? No one's ever done that. Like, how many push-ups does he have to do? In the Ultimate movie, my favorite thing that Nolan did, and there's so many brilliant things that Nolan did, but my favorite one was, there's a night after Batman goes to fight crime, and Bruce Wayne wakes up and he's got bruises, and you see him take a breath, and he rolls out of bed and starts doing push-ups. And you've never seen that before. Like, what does Batman have to do to prepare?
Right.
So I wrote this report, and it ended up getting in the hands of Nolan, who was supposed to go do Troy, but instead decided to come and adapt that Batman version. And he pitched a much bigger, much more complete version of that. And then we relaunched Batman. So that was my life for a little while. Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises. And I worked with Chris. I tried to get Memento made when I was a producer, and then touched Insomnia a little bit. Then we did Batman Begins, where we did Prestige, Dark Knight, Inception, Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar, and Dunkirk. So I worked on everything with Chris except for now Tenet that just came out. So I was working on the Chris Nolan movies. Then I read a script. So we've now touched on piece of known IP, you got a good take for it. Piece of unknown IP that you think could be big, like Harry Potter. The other thing that happens is writers will write a story and you can buy it and try and make it. And these writers wrote a script that I thought was the funniest thing I'd read ever. And I gave it to my friend Todd Phillips, and we made the first Hangover. And that became another franchise.
But Todd gave you the script? Or no,
yes.
You found
There was an agent at Creative Artists Agency named Gregory McKnight, who's now at UTA, I think. And he read the script. He shared it with Phillips. Phillips sent it into the studio. And I think he was planning on just producing it. And we called him and said, you should direct this. And he rewrote the script and then directed it. And that became a huge hit.
But didn't you tell me that no one wanted to play the main lead role of Hangover?
Yeah, so Todd, the director, who we think is absolutely brilliant, I think he is.
And what has he done before Hangover?
So that's the thing. He had just done something called School for Scoundrels.
Okay.
And it was a disaster.
Gotcha.
So he was ice cold. But my boss at the time, Jack Robinov, and I, we thought he was a genius. We knew he was a genius. And so, we really believed in him. And what happened was, he came onto the movie and no big movie stars would sign on.
Yeah.
Because they thought School for Scoundrels was bad.
They were saying no because of Todd Phillips at the time. They thought he can't do a good movie.
And Warner Brothers had a reputation for not being good at comedy. So we all wanted to prove something. And then we made the biggest R-rated comedy ever.
How'd you find Bradley Cooper?
So Todd pushed for from The Wedding Crashers.
Okay.
I pushed for Galifianakis.
Yeah.
who was incredible. And Ed Helms ended up being the magic of the movie. And Justin Bartha was in a movie for me with Marty Brest like 5 years before. He's a really good actor, Bartha. And that was our group. And we went and made the movie, and it was a huge deal. Now, you and I were talking that a lot of people in the audience are brand folks.
That's right.
And so it's a good moment to talk about brands and the movies. Because Caesar's Palace let us shoot The Hangover in Caesar's Palace because the brand was in real trouble. So they didn't have people gaming on the floor, so they let us shoot. After the movie came out,
Well, I heard before that, like I remember this, they were close to bankruptcy.
and they were, I think
They were on the market.
Yeah,
Being sold.
and Harris owned them, right? And they were going to rebrand it, I think, as like, what's the new concept?
Yeah.
Because no one wants Caesar's Palace. After the movie came out, Caesar's Palace is now the #1 consumer-facing brand. It's now, what is it, 12 years ago that that movie came out? They have 15 hangover suites at Caesar's Palace. And Harris is not only not bankrupt, but they now trade as Caesar's Palace.
Wow.
So that was another good success story. And you're talking about franchise films, there's so much money that comes out of them. Now there's like slot machines with The Hangover. Caesar's is making hotel rooms. It's an amazing business.
Well, funny story, we were talking about brands and movies, going back to the whole notion that because it's not a known big IP, that a lot of the brands or investors will say, we don't want to be a part of it, and then they lose the upside. So I actually remember talking to Kevin Kwan before the Crazy Rich Asians premiere. We had dinner. It's a little ramen shop down by Melrose. I think I could say this. And he was just super angry because he said, he was laughing afterwards. He said he begged Singapore Airlines to let them use Singapore Airlines because they're going to Singapore for Crazy Rich Asians with Warner Brothers Studios. And Singapore Airlines was kind of like, what is this? And long story short, they passed on it. And of course, that opening Crazy Rich Asians scene when she goes on to the airline, and it's so fast. It would have been amazing, right? And they completely missed out on that, right? And now it's like, well, if you do Crazy Rich Asians 2, you're gonna have Singapore Airlines. He's like, hell no. So he's like, they missed their chance. Let's stick on brands and blockbusters. Lego. That is a perfect example. Rewind. How in the world did you get the idea to turn a toy block building company into a Lego movie? Like how did that happen?
Okay, so
how hard was it to make it?
At this point in my career, I've gotten pretty high up at Warner Brothers. So I think I'm like the president of development or something like that. So people are bringing me ideas all day now. So I don't have to go out and look. Everything's coming to me. And we had a proper genius on our lot as a producer, this guy named Roy Lee. And Roy was not only just a genius and a hustler, but he was fearless. And so Roy called the switchboard of Lego and asked for the consumer products people, got to the person, and eventually got the rights to sell Warner Brothers the Lego movie. And he partnered with Dan Lin, and they went to Matt Riley, one of my executives, and Matt came to me and said, I want to do this. And I said, yes. And when I said yes, all of them got a free pass, and I was on the newspaper saying I was an idiot. But we turned it into something great, and it was a lot of hard work. It became this huge hit, and the biggest beneficiary of all that work is Lego.
Yep.
The Warner Brothers made a couple $100 million, which is awesome. But Lego opened China.
Yep.
People in China weren't playing with Legos until that movie came out. And so it grew their brand. They're the third biggest toy company in the world, and it grew their brand like crazy. If it feels like there's no risk, that's because there's going to be no reward. It has to feel unbelievably risky, but you think that the execution is going to be great. Because Harry Potter, unbelievably risky, execution was great, giant franchise. 300, really risky time, execution great, huge hit. Hangover, really risky, no one wants to be a part of it then. And by the time you join here, it's too late. We don't want you. You've got to be somebody who comes in super early and bets on, either you're betting on me as an executive, or you're betting on Jason as a finder of businesses and an executive and a producer, or you're betting on a writer you believe in, or an idea that you believe in. But if you wait for it to be a hit, now you're going to go do a tie-in with Pixar at Disney? Good luck. Like, they don't want you. But if you're in early, you get all of the benefit. And that could be true for a country. I mean, look what Crazy Rich Asians did for Singapore.
Yep.
Unbelievable. You know, it could be for a hotel. So we talk about this all the time. Pretty Woman went to the Regent Beverly Wilshire, the Reg Bev Will, she called it, I think. That was 1989. And women are still excited to check into the Regent Beverly Wilshire in Beverly Hills because of that movie. Caesar's Palace. You can sell an alcohol brand. We put my favorite bourbon into Crazy Stupid Love. And it went from $70 a bottle to $2,300 a bottle.
That was called
Happy Van Winkle.
That's right.
And the power of being involved in a hit movie is massive. And the brands, it's hard for them. They're terrified of losing their job for making the wrong bet. And they want to be able to control the image of their brand, which you can't do in a movie. That bourbon bottle was held by Ryan Gosling with his hand over the label. If it was a brand placement, they would have been pulling their hair out. But it doesn't matter. If you're associated with things that are really cool and that people have a connection to,
they'll eventually find out. And
we quadrupled Lego's worldwide sales.
Wow.
I mean, that is billions and billions and billions of dollars of value.
Let's get into Stampede. I think that was, to me, when I first connected with you, was hearing all these amazing stories of how you were able to identify a franchise early stage when no one wanted it, was thinking about it, or wanted to make it. But then you had this also magic where you were able to find the right talent, the Christopher Nolan, the Todd Phillips, and you were able to put them together, and then it created this amazing blockbuster franchise. But then you realized the studios were losing the real value, which was the brands that were being created from these blockbusters. Walk me through again and walk the audience through why now Stampede Ventures? Why did you leave at the height of your career, 22 years from cutting fruit, to become studio president, making 7-figure salaries, hanging out with stars, making the biggest movies, showing up on the red carpet, and all of a sudden, you know what, I'm just going to leave so that I can go start, again, a new thing, which, again, makes sense with your thinking because you're identifying all these new things. And you also had a major stint in being an angel investor and a venture capitalist. Explain the process of your last 2 years at Warner all the way to the launch of Stampede.
Yeah, so about 6 months into running all of Warner Brothers, all the production worldwide, I loved the people I was working with and I loved the work, but fear was getting too powerful inside the studio. They couldn't articulate it, but they were terrified of what was going on at Netflix and what was going to do to the business. And they were terrified of failure, and they were terrified of losing their jobs. And it was just creeping and creeping and creeping in. And it was getting harder and harder to do what you have to do, which is take a big risk to have a big hit. So they would say, we just want to make things that are already hits. And I know, you know, that's just death. You don't know how long it's going to take, but you're going to die. If you're not innovating and if you're not changing and pushing yourself, you may last 7 years, 10 years, but you're going to die. And look where we are now. Warner Brothers is going to release 6 films, I think, next year. And maybe it'll have a resurgence with HBO Max and going into streaming and all that stuff, but you have to take these big risks, and they didn't want to do it. So I knew I was going to start my own company, and I wanted to learn how to be a good CEO. So I did 1 hour a week where I met with the founder. And when they walked out of my office, I wrote a check right then. And I wrote a check to, it was 4 years, so 200 meetings. I wrote 45 checks. And
So 45 startups.
Yes.
And 45 entrepreneurs at the early seed stage.
Exactly. And so I got to watch CEOs found companies and see what they did well and see what they did wrong, but also how they treated investors. Because I knew I was about to have investors and I wanted to treat them well. And I wanted to be a CEO that gave them the value that they were seeking out of their investment. So I started doing that. And I knew I was going to lose all my money because I didn't know anything. And I said to my wife, I'm going to lose all this money. And she's like, that's fine. Like, you didn't go to graduate school or anything like that. So this will be your graduate school and it's fine. And those investments are huge.
You ended up making a ton of money.
Yeah. I invested in Allbirds right as it was launching, not before it launched. Robinhood.
What stage were you in with Robinhood?
I was in the Series A, I think.
Wow.
Of Robinhood. Those guys had killed it. I was in VidMob. I was in Hooked. So Hooked now reaches 100 million uniques a month. Teenage girls, mostly. She's done incredibly well. VidMob's done incredibly well. Press Juicery did well. So I want to do consumer products too and learn about that stuff. There's a company called Q Health that just got the biggest contract to do government COVID testing.
Wow.
And more. But it was great to watch these founders and learn from them. And we launched Stampede, and the first person I called was Jason.
And thank you for letting me help you start Stampede. But what did you see missing in the studio system? What did you see missing in the Hollywood ecosystem? Why Stampede Ventures? Why the business model? Why is it so exciting to you that you can now execute on your childhood dream, just have your own company? But what makes it different than all the other production companies and studios out there in Hollywood land?
It's such a great question. And we are focused exclusively on creating new franchises. And it's amazing. The studios are not. And they think they are because they're making big movies out of things that they own. But that's not creating new franchises. And the real problem is they've disregarded the audience's pleasure in discovering and owning something for themselves that they can go tell their friends about. And that's what a real franchise is. Something that's new that you can call your buddy and go, look, I saw Deadpool, right? And you're like, this is crazy. This is the craziest movie ever. And you got to go see it. So Deadpool becomes a franchise. John Wick. What an unbelievable movie. You call your friends and go, I know it's crazy, but Keanu made this incredible movie. You got to go see it. Those are the only two real franchises that have been created in the last 10 years of the studios. And so we put ourselves, our blinders on, to only create things that could be someone's favorite movie ever, their favorite television show ever. And we're well on our way now. And so now we're going to be making these, the next version of The Hangover and 300 and Matrix and all that stuff. And the side part is that we will be a proper partner to brands like no one has ever been before.
How so?
Just because we understand the power that our movies are going to have in the marketplace. So I make movies and television shows and stuff that are culturally significant events. And the brands that have been involved with my culturally significant events have exploded. Caesar's Palace and Lego and Patrick Van Winkle are perfect examples, but there's many more. And so now we're just going to be more deliberate about it. And so we get calls, as you know, every day from brands of like, please, can we partner with you? Can we pay for the movie? Can we blah, blah, blah? And, it has to be the right fit. There has to be an emotional connection that we believe in. But when we find it, we're going to make some brands into super brands.
What would you say is the best way for a brand to engage with a platform like Stampede to make a story, a film, an original series, a documentary? What's the best approach in your mind?
So,
what are the yeses and what are the nos?
Okay, so the best way to be in business with Stampede is to be in business with Jason Long.
There you go.
So,
I can't argue that.
So the best gateway into Stampede for corporations and businesses and brands and investors and all people that want to get to us, I'm focused on the scripts. I'm making great movies. Everybody calls you to get to Stampede, and it's the right thing. You've got an eye and you know the emotional connection to go. So brands should call you and say, how do I get in? And what they should do is talk to us about the true emotional core of who they are as a brand and let us amplify that. We are not going to have Brad Pitt hold up your cereal box and say, I love Frosted Flakes. But having Brad Pitt step out of an Aston Martin wearing a Givenchy suit elevates those brands and is appropriate for him. And those are the kind of things that we're excited to do with real brand partners who are really invested in Stampede. We're doing it already.
Yeah.
Our investors get extra special love and support, as they should, because they're our real partners.
Going back to Stampede, there's a very specific formula, or I would say quadrant, that we test whether or not this IP can become a franchise or not a franchise. Walk me through that a little bit or can we share a little bit of the secret sauce?
I'm happy to share it because nobody likes it. Nobody wants to do it, which is great.
Awesome. So we share.
So the only way something becomes a franchise is through exceptional execution. So let's put that aside because my team is built to do that. We've done it. I've made 120 movies and $36 billion in box office. So we're going to make great things. The real question is, what are you going to make? And if it looks like a hit and it feels really safe and you know it's going to be a hit, we don't want it.
Interesting.
Because everybody else is looking at the exact same thing and there's going to be 50 of those. If it looks like something that scares the shit out of you, excuse my French, if it looks like something that really scares you, but if somebody did it really well, the whole world's going to want to watch it, that's what we want. We have had an elephant as our logo. It's now come off. It's just going to be Stampede Ventures. The best logo for our company is a swan. Because it starts as an ugly duckling. Right? And everybody wants the swan. Everybody wants the swan.
Such a great analogy.
But you gotta bet on the ugly duckling. And so everything we do, when we show it to brands and investors and partners, they look at us like we're crazy. And then we know we're on something.
Gotcha. I'm shot on a weekly basis, sometimes daily, for those of you who are watching this, but Stampede, we are less than 2 years old. We have now set up and sold over 50 projects.
Yeah.
I think we were averaging, when I was doing the math during the pandemic, when other companies are falling apart and other content companies are not selling and can't figure it out and scrambling to stay alive, I think we average selling 1 or 1.5 projects a week.
Yeah.
This year.
Yes.
What is the magic? I don't think any studio, any production company in the world, and especially Hollywood, has the type of success and hit rate and volume that we're doing at Stampede week after week. It's like they're texting me every day, like, sold another one to HBO, another one to Sony, another one to Netflix, another one to Sci-Fi, another one to Amazon.
We sold another show to Disney Plus today.
Boom. Like, I mean, I've been a part of other production companies, advised, invested, and we're lucky. These other companies and production companies, if they sell 2 projects a year.
Yeah, we have an amazing team, as you know, but they've been trained differently than everybody else. It's this thing where they don't have any fear. If they think something is great, they're going to find a spot for it and find somebody else to figure out that it's great, and they do it. And the stuff that we're finding, the version of those things succeeding is so massive that people get it. It's worth it to take a chance on something that could be the next Harry Potter or the next Lego or the next Batman. And those are the big ideas and the big swings.
But is that what the buyers are actually into, our ugly duckling ideas?
Well, it's a really good question, and it's hard to find the right buyer for each thing because now you're running back into the system where people are scared and that. But we take an ugly duckling idea and we work on it and package it in such a way that they can feel comfortable. Maybe you put a big movie star into it, or a director that they know has done something weird before that succeeded. And once you do that, now you've got a super original idea that they feel is going to be executed, and then you can go.
And then, do you feel like our team at Stampede is extra knowledgeable or cognizant or conscious and aware of what the buyers are looking for and what they want? Or is it more just, we know how to package it and they know that we can execute it excellently and they're willing to take a gamble?
It's more the latter. I mean, we work really hard, and the young people at the company especially try to find out what broadcasters want, what we want. By the time you work on something that person has said they wanted, and you go back, they're fired, or they're at some other job, or they've shut down the service. That just happened last week.
Yep.
And so we keep that information, but we don't really use it. We have 4 pillars, as you know, and the first pillar is hustle. And that is the main thing. Our group reads more and looks at more and consumes more into the filter than any other company. I think 10 times as much as our competitors. Then we have found people that have really good taste and have been encouraged to be fearless. So the second pillar is taste. The third pillar, which it does not exist in Hollywood, is follow through. Like, I called you about this. I'm calling you tomorrow. I'm going to call you the next day. I'm going to treat the creatives really well. Someone who sold us a book from 4 years ago should still get a call every week. Here's what's going on with your book. So they feel taken care of. So that kind of follow through. And the last one, which people laugh at me all the time, except for people like you, is manners. Say please. Say thank you. When someone does something for you, say thank you. Appreciate it. Look them in the eye. Tell them that you understood that was a thing they had to go get from their boss and you appreciate it. Not for any business outcome, but we want people in our orbit to be treated well.
Let's talk about the next phase of Stampede now. You're talking about the film fund that we're together raising. A lot of those who are watching don't know, our third co-founder is pretty bad ASS dude from Silicon Valley. His name's Gideon Yu. He was a former CFO for Facebook and YouTube, and I believe he was secretary of whatever his position was at Yahoo when he went to Alibaba, etc., etc. The combination of having Gideon Yu, in my mind, who's probably the most renowned, respected, or one of the most respected CFOs of Silicon Valley history ever. So you have a kingpin in Silicon Valley, and then you have a kingpin in Hollywood. So now you have Silicon Valley, Silicon Beach coming together and then now going to the next level where it's a Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, Hollywood now. The studios are now struggling to find franchises. Stampede is now in position to become the next franchise hit-making Marvel, Lucas, Disney of our own time. Now that we're raising a fund which will enable us to not just own the IP, but actually make the content.
And own the actual film.
And own the actual film, own the actual TV series.
We'll control distribution, we'll control marketing.
Why is this new next level of Stampede so exciting to you? And what does that mean as far as value proposition for the platform and the company?
Yeah, so we've spent the last few years getting all of these next Harry Potters and Hangover stuff ready. And the next phase is to close out this fund and then to go make them into movies that we now own from beginning to end with our partners in this film fund. But as a group, we can control every step of this process so we can make sure brand integration is done in exactly the right way. We can decide where this stuff shoots. So if we want to go build a film industry in Indonesia or in Taiwan, we can go take this and land and build something exactly right with taking care of people the proper way, all those things that we can do. But the bigger piece is we own these films. So when you do the deal for the slot machines, you do the deal for the hotel, you do the deal for the sweatpants and the shoes and the everything that people want to buy afterwards, that all comes into that same film fund. For the first time ever, franchise films as a unit are going to be owned by private investors. Never been done before.
And when some success stories that are similar would be like MRC, who owned House of Cards, or they owned Ozark.
Correct.
And so the value was in owning the actual content.
Yes.
They
Pixar's another good example. So Pixar made Toy Story and Bug's Life and Nemo, I think, were the first three, as an independent studio.
Interesting.
So
they financed it themselves. They didn't get outside financing from the studio.
They made a distribution deal with Disney. So Disney distributed and marketed for them, but they financed the movies. They controlled it from end to end. And for them, they wanted to be able to control it, to have their process work. For me, I want to be able to control it to make sure that these are franchise hits and that we can have all the consumer products coming off. They then sold to Disney, which is a potential exit for us is maybe we sell like Lucasfilms or Marvel or Pixar. But the main thing is that we want to be able to run franchise films with our very small group and do right by them and deliver for the audience.
And control 360.
The whole thing.
The whole entire A through Z line production.
I mean, we'll control the marketing spend. We'll control the distribution with a partner. And the partners that have already come into the fund are just unbelievable. And it's going to be a fun ride.
Mungkinkah ku bayar tanpa sentuhan?
Mungkin dong, hanya HP yang kau sentuh. Bayar belanja tinggal scan QR aja.
Manusia zaman dulu dan sekarang kebutuhannya berubah. Dengan jaringan baru 4.5G Axis yang terfiberisasi, kamu bebas berubah jadi apa yang kamu mau. Terus berubah, kenapa enggak?